Hello and welcome in this new program of our podcast, in which we talk to a lot of different people from all over the world who are working to make the world a more peaceful place for people to live in. And this is very urgent and very important to talk about, seeing all the wars that are going on, seeing all the victims suffering day by day in especially Ukraine and Gaza at the moment. And today I'm very happy and honored to speak to Karen Kwiatkowski, who is a retired Lieutenant Colonel of the Air Force of the US, has a long career and experience in the US Army at the Pentagon. And I'm very honored again to speak to you and hear from your expertise on how we got here in this place with so much war, and how are we, for God's sake, getting to a place where it's more peaceful? Thank you, Karen. My first question would be maybe a little bit about yourself. Like, what was your field of expertise mainly within at the Pentagon?
Yeah. Well, I joined the Air Force in 1982. I was commissioned, and for the first 15 years, I worked in communications and information. So kind of the technology of communications at the 80s and 90s type of thing. And then in the late 90s, in the last 5 years of my 20-year career, I worked as a political, political military officer. But we looked at regions of the country. People were assigned different regions. Air Force had them. And then later I worked at the Office of the Secretary of Defense, doing much the same thing, looking at various areas of the world that are important to the United States military or important to the United States politicians. And we were consumers of intelligence and other data, and we would put together papers that justify, rationalize, or explain kind of the direction that the Pentagon wanted to go. And of course, the Pentagon's a political organization, so the directions the Pentagon wants to go reflect the political leadership. It reflects the Congress. It reflects the corporate state in America. It reflects, the people that make policy that aren't in the Pentagon, but they know what they want to do, or so they think they do. And the Pentagon exists to really satisfy those people. We like to think military is about defense. The Pentagon that I worked in, and the 20 years I spent my life in, at least the last 10 years in the post-Cold War time of my career, defense was not part of it at all. And so anyway, I had my eyes open.
If it wasn't defense, what was it focused on?
Well, I guess to put it nicely, in a nice way, you could say it was focused on control of all of the world. So that if something was happening in the world, the United States would be able to shape an outcome that they wanted. So really manipulation of global politics. That's certainly what the military did. And certainly you could see how we did it even before 9/11. We were dropping bombs plenty of times on plenty of countries before 9/11 to make a point, to shape, to create fear or compliance in a foreign country.
What's the ultimate goal of that? Because like I've asked this to also other professionals, and some point to very cynically to the money that's being made by the industry or something, or others point to real agendas to maintain hegemony here and there, or what kind of agendas are at play?
Yeah, well, okay, so I didn't recognize this as a young person, but I came to understand that the United States is an empire. So, we're not a republic in the sense of a republic, a self-governing republic. I mean, we're way too big for that, and our military is way too large. So we are an empire, and an empire sees enemies everywhere, and it sees opportunities to make money everywhere. So a big part of the military is to help the United States as an empire and as a corporate state, which it is, profit and put them in a position to compete very well against other parts of the world. Now, if you go back to when I was I wasn't even in the military, I was a young person, we had President Carter. And Mr. Carter's wife just died. So he was in the news. You know, he's almost 100 years old. He's just an interesting president. He was not a popular president. And one of the reasons he wasn't popular is because he was, despite the fact that he had served in the Navy, he was kind of a peace-oriented person. He was a liberal, but he was a peace liberal, not like the liberals we have today, which modern liberals are very much war promoting. But he was a peaceful liberal. But at the same time, what do we have as part of Carter's legacy? We have the Carter Doctrine, which said that the United States military will enforce security over oil sources in the Middle East. He said the Middle East oil, and this is back in 1977, it's 1976, the Middle East oil is a U.S. resource. Well, obviously, we're a consumer, but it's not a U.S. resource. But that was how it was defined. It was a U.S. resource. It was a European resource, and we would stand up for Europe and their interests, and we would secure militarily the Middle East and, you know, the Red Sea, the Straits, the whole bit. So that happened many years ago, many decades ago, under
was it really Carter that designed it, or was it designed under his control?
That's right. So what I'm saying is we have two presidents who weren't listened to by the deep state. Carter's one of them, and Trump's the other one. Trump also intended to do certain things, and they didn't do it. They basically said, no, you think you know what we're doing, but we're doing something else. And so the power that drives the United States has been in place for a long, long time. It is a neoconservative leaning, interventionist oriented, economically aimed at economic dominance and military dominance around the world. These people that serve in the military, and they're supported by Congress, but Congress is not ideological. Congress needs money. Congressmen need money. Senators need money to be elected, and they need support to be reelected. So they're easy to control. But it's the folks that are professional bureaucrats in the security apparatus that do not go away. You elect a new president, supposedly he makes new appointees, but the core power of policymaking never really goes away. And that core power is imperial-minded. It is neoconservative in its perspective on how the U.S. should relate to the world, which is in a dominating fashion as a unipolar power, top dog. So none of that really changes. And that has guided our foreign policy for a long time. But if we go back just a little bit before Carter to when Nixon in 1973 took us off the gold standard and made our money kind of free floating in value, the US dollar, which of course was dominant even then, but it was tagged to gold. It was linked to gold at one point, which provided some limitations to how much you could print, how much you could spend and borrow. Well, he disconnected it from that, of course, and that's well known. But what commodity was it connected to? Because back in the 70s, the United States was just beginning to lose or fade as an industrial powerhouse. It's starting to decline as we saw other countries rise in the industrial production. So what was the thing that our money connected to? Well, it connected to oil, which we were supporting militarily. So the petrodollar. Yes. And that brings us back to why we do these things. So we are an empire. We have an ideological, professional cadre of bureaucrats that shape our foreign policy, think tanks, the money people that buy the congressmen or that fund the congressmen, and they very much have an agenda. But we also have survival of our finances, which depends on the dollar remaining as the world's global reserve currency, which it had been, in part because energy, oil specifically, which has, that's the massive 20th century and today also driver of the economy. So we had the petrodollar, and people would trade gold. They would always convert. They would always need dollars. And if you need dollars, our government could make those dollars available in an unlimited fashion. And of course, there's a reason we run, trillions of dollars of debt every year, and we owe, I think it's now to 33 or 34 trillion in current debt. And plus we have promises to our people that we can't pay, our entitlements and everything, that we have no way of funding those in the future. And so that puts the United States as a nation, as an empire at home, in a very difficult place. So these folks that run our policy, of course, elected politicians, they know what they know. I'll go to Trump for an example. Trump wanted to put America first. He had a very popular many people found his message good. But Trump himself, and he was a businessman, and he was not a professional politician. This was all a plus. However, Trump's understanding of how our money system works, his understanding of the Federal Reserve, his understanding of how trade works, he was very much, his America first went on to, we should produce everything ourselves and put tariffs on everybody else. Well, that's not productive. That's not a wise way of enriching your country. That's a good way to impoverish, and people voted. He still has a following today, but he's not really an economic leader in any way. And most of our politicians have no understanding of that. So they do rely on the Trump called them the deep state, but they do rely on these professional cadres of bureaucrats. And those guys don't understand the economy either, but they have overseas agendas. They understand dominance and they understand control. And they don't understand the economy, but they sense something slipping away. So they very much want to fight. They want to fight Russia via Ukraine. They want Israel to fight everybody in the Middle East and put them off their balance. And of course, apparently they want to fight China over Taiwan. These aren't good answers.
No, it's you already mentioned and touched upon so many things that I wanted to ask about. Yeah. Okay. So and one of the things is you mentioned this deep state. You also call it deep state, and at first you called it. You pointed to the the long-term bureaucrats that are there within the State Department and the Pentagon and all these places, and then you point to the think tanks and it's always, I don't want to get in sort of this conspiratorial arena, but it's obvious that money makes power in a big way in the US and more in Europe as well. So this deep state, you've already touched upon it, but who are they, and how do they have? Is it like because they know each other and exchange that they automatically are in line with a certain agenda, or do they really coordinate in a way, this is our goal and this is what we should aim for? Or is it just a cultural thing that people get taught at school? Or how does this theory about the US being the top dog always and fighting every war they can fight, how does it come about? What stimulates it? What creates it? And how does it work?
It's hard to say exactly. There is people that know each other, people that are comfortable in that world, that have worked together for a long time. There are the kind of thought leaders, and we talk about old people of 100 years old. Kissinger just passed away, and he's known as a realist. He had some criticisms of some of the things the United States is doing now with the very neoconservative intervention and seeking war rather than actually seriously wanting peace. But with Kissinger, he was very much a realist, and he was very much a globalist in the sense of he saw the United States as should have been the global policeman or the top determiner of how all outcomes would be. So that attitude has been in our foreign policy for a long time. But I think what's changed and why we have what we call a deep state more today is back in the 30s and 40s, back in even under Wilson's time in the World War I timeframe, there was a conversation in this country, a political conversation that was carried on not just by elected leaders, but by think tanks and by policymakers that could debate and argue. And certainly when our country began in the late 1800s, early 1900s, to really become an empire, to really seek empire. I mean, we sought to take over the Spanish Empire, and we looked for empire opportunities in Indonesia. and in Vietnam. I mean, that was an imperial type of an exercise.
The US has effectively taken over the British Empire also, of course.
Yes, exactly. And so as we trended in that direction, there were voices. In fact, the 1930s Republican Party was a very great voice pushing against empire, pushing what we would say, people say, oh, it's isolationist. It wasn't that, but it was certainly a non-interventionist type of approach. And you could hear those voices. You could hear them on, we didn't have television early on. You could hear it on radio. You could hear it, you would read it in your newspapers. The newspapers there were many newspapers, of course, prior to the internet. So there was a debate. And then, of course, we had the Cold War. And the Cold War, because the enemy could be demonized as communism, it was the debate was more hostile. The debate was more, if you support the communists, you are anti-American. And of course, McCarthyism and the history and all that we know. So then it became dangerous to discuss differences of foreign policy opinion because it was made more and more black and white in the media. And of course, along the same time, you have the rise of television. By the time we get to the internet, you say, well, oh, we should have lots of viewpoints. We should have lots of sources of data, and certainly evidence could be produced to support arguments on any side. If you wanted to argue for war, you could get evidence, but you could also argue against war, and you could have plenty of evidence. That's what the internet, that's the promise of the internet. But what tended to happen was a continued concentration of black and white decisions and an overwhelming, people are too overwhelmed by information. If you think about old time newspapers with editors of different political persuasions, they would debate a position and boil it down so that people could understand it. Now we have nobody except governments boiling it down so people can understand it. They dominate the airwaves, and the average person doesn't have the time to go find out what's happening. Now, you and I are talking today, and millions of people around the planet are talking and listening and learning because of the internet. So the information is there to support a viewpoint that is an alternative to global domination by one country, in this case, the United States. But it is not fulfilled the promise that we would have more conversations. What happens in Washington, certainly, and in other, I would say it happens in Germany. I think it happens in other capitals as well, is that there is no conversation. There's only the allowed conversation. And the allowed conversation is pro-war, pro-intervention, and filling the pockets of the political people, supporting the corporate state. And when I say the corporate state, I say, oh, what a corporate state. Well, 40% of the world's military arms exports come from the United States. We have a decent sized economy, of course, but we also overemphasize and are over dependent on the export of high priced and high profit margin weapons. One of the reasons we run out of bullets and munitions, certainly, as we will talk about maybe, is because those aren't high profit production. We don't like, our businesses in the United States did not really like to make a bunch of munitions because we're in the profit business, and the profit business is large, impossible to fly airplanes like the F-35. Profit business is
super expensive and long contracts for repair, etc. Yeah,
that's right, and having lifelong guaranteed income.
It's like the famous ice cream machines at the McDonald's, no, like the F-35.
Yes, yeah. So we have a system that rewards this single-minded, non-debatable. This is America's role. This is what we do, and we have there's no space.
But how come? Because it seems to have
an alternative.
Yeah. So how come it has deteriorated then? Because actually, you would indeed expect the internet to open information, and true, it's happening absolutely. The fact that we are talking is an example, but it's in Europe exactly the same. It is like we feel the same. We have the same dynamics, I think, in media and politics, that there's suddenly a certain line that you cannot debate anymore. So how come that it has actually deteriorated? Like also in Europe, we feel the same. we feel like, okay, you can say things about Ukraine or Israel, but there is a line, and when you cross that line, you're sort of out. You're not taken seriously anymore. There's no real debate. There's only within certain predefined margins you can talk, and outside of that, you are out. So how come? What has happened to that?
Well, I think what's happened is governments have embraced the technology that allows them to control all of the people. And of course, just like in traditional colonialism, you would go into a country and you would divide the people along natural divisions if possible, but you would somehow divide the people, work with one side, and cause the other side to, in a way of weakening their resistance to the government that's in there. Well, in America, in the United States, our 50 states and 4 or 5 time zones that we have are really, in a sense, treated much as a colonial power would treat a colony. So how do we do that? Well, we cause them to fight and be different and argue over things that are really not going to change because we are arguing about them. We have people focused on short-term things, and it's easy in our country because we do have frequent elections. We have every 2 years Congress elections, every 6 years. Well, every 2 years, we also elect a third of our senators. And then we have every 4 years a presidential election, which is really nonsensical in some ways because our presidents make no difference regardless of what they say. In fact, it's very interesting that if you look to all the presidents, I don't care, go back even to Nixon, the president that presents himself, the candidate who presents himself as the most supportive of non-intervention, the most supportive of peace, the most supportive of domestic prosperity, always gets elected. He's the guy that gets elected. Sometimes both of them are trying to compete for that position, but that's the popular position. But once he's elected, very rarely does any of this happen. They very much after the first week in office suddenly decide that there is a war they have to continue to fund. There's the powers that be, the deep state, if you want to call it the deep state, the existing direction of the ship of state is very much and has been very much to preserve the petrodollar, to preserve dominance in the globe militarily if they can. Now, it's not going to work forever, and we're seeing it fall apart before our very eyes in the United States. Our military is not a military that can fight hardly anywhere. This is well known to people in the military. It's well known to observers outside of this country. It's not well known to the deep state and the politicians, most of whom have no military experience and do not serve in the military. So as generations become further removed from the actual work of being an empire, the actual physical, you got to go kill people, as they are removed from that, they don't understand it. They imagine that it has power that it does not have, and they tend to try to use it, which is why we see these terrible examples. And I'll just, the last 20 years are full of them. Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, name it. None of those are successes in terms of a military operation at all.
Aren't they, you can say they are maybe successes in terms of like money-making businesses?
Well, yes, because that is a driver. That is, the corporate state, the politicians, a great deal of lobbying is done by these companies. And also, being that we are the world's biggest exporter, there are jobs that people have that are directly related to the defense industry. It's abnormally large in our country. It's far larger than it really should be in terms of the sectors of our economy. And so many people who vote and need jobs find that their jobs require them to fight wars and make ammunition and make weapon systems and do military research and the whole thing. So it is a job sector, which again is kind of like, and that sector drives politics, because they say every carrier, every large aircraft has parts made in every congressional district around. And this is by design. There's no doubt about it. When they look at where do they want to put a factory, where do they want to put their headquarters, it is related to how does this impact us with the Congress and them, putting money into our pockets and maintaining that cash flow. So, that's a big part of it.
Like my final question about this structure, because I think we can talk very long about it, and then I'd like to continue to some more of the recent events and wars. My last question would actually be, like, you would expect, like, a country like an empire like the US, it has a lot of different parts and it has a lot of different power centers. It has intelligence service, it has the Congress, it has the White House, it has the Pentagon. There's all power centers, the media. How come they are? I'm always surprised how unison they seem to be. Like they all seem to be on the same agenda, the same. Like there seems to be so little friction in this.
There's no friction. There's no friction. If you look at who owns the major media corporations in the United States, it is defense industries. Okay.
Really? Okay.
Absolutely. Yes, they are the top owners. And one level above that, the substantive owners of our defense industry, our media industry, and of course, naturally, the Congress, because they're the big donors, are two big firms, BlackRock and Vanguard. And there's another third size group, but these are the two big ones. And they are capital companies that simply own stock all over the place, but they own enough stock in the major corporations that control media, that control military stuff, that control the think tanks and fund the think tanks, donate to them, and of course, support the various Congress and senators that are in our system, all owned by the same kind of people, and actually are very centralized. So if you think about, we say, oh, it's a big country, it's full of different kinds of people. We have different accents all over the country, and you can talk about how maybe unique and broad the United States is, but our government is amazingly centralized in terms of the things that it does, and it's centralized because it fears the people. This is, if you think about a dictator in a small country. Let's just take any small country with a dictator. What does a dictator want to do? He doesn't care as much about what's happening around the world. He really focuses on, what are my people doing? What are they thinking? Who's coming up to replace me? Are they all doing what I tell them to do? Are they questioning me? It's a very paranoid, kind of an East Germany kind of thing. Imagine East Germany if you had the NSA with all of its modern technology, and everybody putting all of their communications in a digital form on the internet, free for the government to scoop up and analyze. Well, we live that today. Now, you say the United States, oh, we're not East Germany, we don't have a Stasi. Well, we don't call it a Stasi, and we don't call it East Germany. We don't consider ourselves a totalitarian type of state. We don't consider ourselves an old-time communist state. But in fact, our government operates in such a centralized manner, in such a paranoid manner, very much concerned about what people will do, that this is why it looks like that. And the control is real. I
have to, what I recognize about it, we are working also on Gaza a lot, and what people tell us who post on Meta-owned services like Instagram and Facebook, that their post just gets removed if Meta doesn't like it,
That's
so
right.
it's Stasi-like.
It is. It's Stasi-like, and our media is all a Meta. Google again with its control. Twitter, before Elon Musk fired all of their control people, and even Twitter, I think, even X, I think, still does some sort of closing out of conversation, but. Reddit used to be a free-for-all. Reddit's not a free-for-all.
But you would almost admire the way it's being done,
That's right. It is.
And also it's wider than the US, I want to say, because why does, if we take the war in Ukraine, why hasn't there be a single critical article about the Western approach or the Western context, from Australia to Canada to EU to Japan even? It's real control. It seems, I don't know how it works, and I don't want to make any conspiracy about it, but it's
not a conspiracy, but also to think about the media corporations. They take, just like human beings everywhere, we tend to take the easy path. There was a joke right now this morning because the Washington Post has a 24-hour strike of its writers. And what's the first comment on X? is, well, don't worry, the CIA is writing your articles anyway. That'll continue as normal. So, the government control of mainstream communications and its ability to punish unpermitted speech. Now, it sounds funny. We have a constitution, we have a First Amendment right in this country, and we cherish it. But in fact, there's a ton of unpermitted speech, and that is enforced by both the law. In fact, the January 6th, the people that protested on the January 6th, all kinds of people who have never had they've never even had a speeding ticket. They're like 50 and 60-year-old people who basically follow the law. They show up, they get tracked down through social media or video or whatever, and they serve 2 or 3 months in jail. Well, what is that about? That's about telling all the rest of us that you better watch out. You better shut up. You better not complain, because you will be punished. You will be embarrassed. It will cost you money for a lawyer. We will put you in jail and we'll treat you badly because we have the power. That's been communicated all the time, that our government has power over us.
It's super interesting what you say, and what I'm constantly thinking about is this question. That is, we see what's going on in Gaza, we see what's going on in Ukraine. Well, Ukraine is maybe more difficult, but Gaza is so obvious a mass slaughter of children and unarmed civilians, etc. It's so obvious, and the UN organizations are speaking out. The Red Cross, Amnesty, Oxfam, all organizations are very clear in saying these are war crimes, genocide even, and this has to stop. Yet, what I wonder, like my government, the Dutch government, does not dare to speak out against it. It's rare. You've seen probably, like, there was a Belgian minister, there was a Spanish minister who was critical. The Spanish minister has been relieved of her duties. To me, this points towards a sort of fear, because it's also obvious, I think, for our own politicians that what's going on is not according to international law and should be condemned, sanctioned, etc.
That's right.
So it's quite, from my perspective, it seems obvious that we are scared to do that, scared for Israel in the first place, but maybe primarily because also there's an influence in the Netherlands, but of course more scared of what the US might say or do or think towards the Netherlands. And that's my perception. I don't know if it's true. So what you just said about repercussions for anyone stepping out of line of the main agenda, I always wonder, what would the repercussions be if the Netherlands had a politician that said, okay, we're not going to go along with this. We're stepping out of this agenda. We have our own course. Because it seems like in the past, there used to be critical European leaders. You had Chirac, who didn't want to join the efforts of the US war in Iraq, I think. And you had previously also de Gaulle, who was a little bit, even before, was more independent. At least Merkel was maybe not independent, but she had her own view on things. And now in this current playing field in Europe, you have Macron, Scholz, Rutte, Sunak, all the same, and no one stepping out of line. It seems like very much one direction, and it's the US direction. So my question, sorry for the long intro, is like, what would actually happen if we stepped out of line and did something that the NATO or the US didn't appreciate?
Yeah, well, you have the guy in Hungary has been very, yes. Orban has been very vocal, and of course he has been made a pariah. Erdogan has been pretty vocal, and he's a pariah. So, but why haven't they been displaced? Well, I think I think it has to do, and again, I think about follow the money, always follow the money. Europe is, America, we're in debt. We're a bankrupt nation. We are a bankrupt nation. People are fleeing from our money. There are multipolar power centers, economic power centers, political power centers, military power centers emerging around the globe. And we can't stop that. But we don't have the ideological or physical military diplomatic tools to deal with it. We don't have anything except what's left of our money and what's left of our military. And we have sought, you mentioned we'd taken over the British Empire. We have actually sought to control Western Europe in every way, political and military. We'd always, I kept, after World War II, kept a great deal of military there with NATO that we subsidize heavily. It's funny, Trump, again, he's a nice point because he did a few things differently. One of the things he wanted to do was reduce our funding of NATO. That was not to be tolerated.
No.
We fund NATO on purpose so that we can control all the members of NATO. And
it's not to help Europe, no?
Not to help Europe. It's to help us control the military there, also to be able to use Western European land and ocean and air for things that we want to do. And it's also with the military, we make fun of the oligarchs of Russia, the oligarchs of Ukraine, the various oligarchs around the world. Well, we have our own oligarchs, and they cut deals all the time. And so many of your politicians, many of Europeans' politicians, just like ours, are bought and paid for in many ways. They benefit from the U.S. and U.S. policy. If they go along, they benefit. If they oppose it, they don't benefit, and they are punished. And also too, Europe's economy, Europe's population is generally an aging population. Things are changing in Europe. I would say demographically, certainly, but they're also changing in terms of economy. What will Europe be making? What will Europe be producing? And I'm sure they'll be making and producing lots of things, but it's shifting. And it's not going to be, it's certainly not now even the center of the world economy. It's not the center of innovation. Neither is the United States, even though we, for a long time, prided ourselves in that. So, the U.S. reaching out to control markets and people and politicians in Western Europe, very much a part of the Ukraine experience. Why did we want, why would NATO want to get involved in Ukraine and try to fight Russia there? Well, part of it was to, control and manage and to ensure that no anti-American popped up, or no questioner, no independent thinker popped up in any of these European countries. And yet it doesn't work, because look at your election. There was an election just recently. And even Meloni's election if you think back to how Meloni ran her campaign, it was a very much an anti-colonial, pro-Italy, Italy first type of a campaign. Yeah, but she immediately brought to heel.
I see those people a little bit as Trojan horses in a way that these guys are sort of vocally very much against the EU. Mm-hmm. But for me, it's suspect if you are very much against EU and not criticize the US, because the EU is okay. I want to cut short. I'm not that nuanced now, but it's controlled by the US. So yes. So if you are making yourself popular by being anti-EU but don't say anything about the US, then it doesn't mean anything, because like Meloni he was very much anti-EU, but super pro-NATO suddenly. And,
there you go, which is amazing. And of course, there's a reason the United States blew up Nord Stream, right? There's a reason that we did that. When we eliminated, our reason was so that we would now have our gas sent to Germany at a huge markup.
But isn't this a risky play? Because
sure it is.
Do they not expect people in Europe to somehow turn against the US?
I think that they think that the powers that be think that when the people start to turn against this and complain and become disruptive, that they will be able to shift blame and control the things. Now, I think
managing the chaos.
They'll manage the chaos, and they believe, you guys are heavily monitored by governments. And there's all kinds of rules on speech and content on the internet. So, everything is being looked at as signals to these, to the United States and to United States allied European countries, signals to see what can we get away with? How much more can we do? What do we need to put a Band-Aid on here and there? The problem comes because we do have these democratic structures, whether they work or not, that the people are angry enough to express themselves that they hate this. Now, do they know what the future is going to hold? No, but they are rejecting to some extent this U.S. thing. Now, another one that comes to mind in terms of an election is in Argentina. Now, the guy in Argentina who won 56% of the vote, very popular, but he's on I'm going to limit the state, have more freedom, more prosperity. At the same time, what does he want to peg the Argentinian peso or lira? I don't remember the thing. He wants to peg it on the dollar. Well, that's suspect to me. Now, this guy has had some education in the United States, and so he may be partial to these kinds of things. He says, well, I don't want the Argentinian central bank, but I want to peg our currency to the dollar. And it's like, if it was me as an American looking at the world, the last thing I would want to do is to bet on the United States dollar. It is the empire is crumbling, as it should. And this is the cycle of empires. It's not something that we can say, oh, it should happen. It will happen. It always happens. This is what we're living through.
What seems so strange is that the actions that the US seems to take in order to prevent it from happening is actually speeding things up, don't you think?
Yes, it is. And that's actually quite typical historically, because the people that sit astride an empire after the empire has matured and gone through cycles of growth generally have no sense at all about what real power looks like. They don't, I know we're going to talk about Ukraine, but the idea in Washington was that our sanctions, which we would double down on with Russia, just as we have on other countries that we don't like, but as a result of the invasion of Ukraine, we would sanction Russia, and that would have not just an effect, but an immediate and a major effect. In fact, it had an effect. It grew markets. It grew markets outside of U.S. control, is what it did. And the Russian economy is fine. It's doing fine. It's weathered it very well.
It's maybe a sign of how little those people are connected to reality. That so many people saw this coming. They saw, if you do this, of course the Russia is going to replace U.S. Companies by other things.
That's right. Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
Let's talk about these wars that the US is involved in and the EU is involved in. Let's maybe start with Israel, Palestine. I have been wondering, it's clear we know that there are so many connections between Israel and the US, and that there's a long friendship, or let's call it partnership or alliance, etc. My real question is maybe switching gears, is how long can the US see Israel doing what it does in Gaza without stopping it? Is it going to allow Israel to terminate the whole of Gaza?
Yes. Yeah, the United States is going to. The policymakers in the United States are so, many of them are so pro-Israel. They're more pro-Israel than they are the United States. And it's not, these people don't live in Israel. So when I say they're pro-Israel, they're pro the idea of Israel more so than the actual country. Because what's happening in Israel, of course, as a result of their what they're doing right now and what they've been doing for 40 years. But certainly this is an exclamation point on that. It is destroying Israel's credibility. It's breaking every hard worked for relationship that Israel had with its Arab neighbors, with its Turkish neighbors. I mean, when you have Erdogan, who had been working for years, Turkey had relationships continuing to grow, investments, joint investments, agreements, sharing of intelligence, all of this with Turkey and Israel. And now it didn't take 3 weeks, and Erdogan wants Bibi Netanyahu in front of the ICC, which I think he may end up there. And he is calling for, he's saying this is a genocide, which it is. And he's one of the few, he's the only member of NATO using those terms, I think. I don't know what Orban has said, but.
How do you see it? Because if the US is not going to, and the EU is following suit, that's the problem. They're not going to do anything independently of the US. So if the US is not going to intervene in the slaughter of civilians, what does the prospect for the Middle East look like?
Well, I think
for the Palestinians in the first place, do you think there will be? Do you think Israel
for the
will
Palestinians?
succeed?
I don't know. I think this is a tragedy for the Palestinians. being played out on everybody's screens, and no one is doing anything about it. Certainly the United States is. The latest that I think that Biden said was he wants it to be wrapped up. This is his word. I want it wrapped up in Gaza by January 1st. And then they asked the, I don't know if it was the IDF or the foreign minister of Israel, and they said, oh, no. He said the end of January. We'll wrap it up at the end. So they're already in negotiations, and that won't happen either, because this is just talk. I think Israel's been very clear about what it is that they're doing. It's an extermination and relocation operation with emphasis on extermination, not relocation, because there's no plans to take care of the people that they are driving into the desert or the sea or wherever these people are going to be driven to. I think it's a tragedy for the Palestinians, and I'm not positive enough to think that this is going to end up being good for them or a win. But I think what is happening is it is a loss for the United States, and it's a loss for Israel, because the whole world, the whole planet is rioting. What are they? They're rioting against U.S. and Israel policy, which there's no daylight between that. Just regardless of what the president says. Oh, I told him not to kill too many innocent civilians. I told him to. Oh, he should be more careful where he drops bunker buster bombs. Oh, why are they going so far south? Why are they hitting hospitals and refugee camps? That's nothing. Those are empty words. They don't. The U.S. government doesn't mean any of that. A third of our department heads, the executive department of Homeland Security, all these guys are Israeli for the most part. They are definitely pro-Zionist people, which is, again, I have to make the separation between, Zionism and Judaism, very different things.
Obviously.
And it's funny, we have a law. You guys, I don't know you guys, and I don't know about in Netherlands, but I know Germany has done this. The House of Congress, the Congress right now, not the Senate, has already voted with very few dissensions to conflate anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism, to conflate those two. Now, in practice, if you criticize the state of Israel, you are told that's anti-Semitic. But in fact, that's not true. In fact, the most critics of Zionism are actually, traditional Jewish folks and scholars. Okay, but it doesn't matter. But now they actually are trying to take a falsehood and make it into a law, a federal law to limit speech, to limit criticism. It's a sign of huge weakness that the government is doing that, because when you make crazy laws that are not consistent with the truth, you increase disrespect for law everywhere, which is what's happening in our country. I don't know how many people are traveling to the United States in our major cities, but they're quite dangerous. They're not places that you want to go to. And the disrespect for law in this country is a sign of a failing empire. It's one of this many, many, many symptoms, debt, destruction of society, disrespect for laws, constant spying and paranoia in your government. Violence. All those things are happening. So what's happening in what the Israelis are doing, what we are allowing, and actually we're not just allowing it, we are funding it. The United States is funding it. The United States accelerated shipments. Our new Speaker of the House, he is a Christian evangelical. He believes in Zionism. He believes that Israel has to have the river to the sea. It must be, completely formed. This is his religious belief. His first priority, which he stated in his first address, was the first thing I would do. The very first priority I have is to fund Israel, to send Israel $11 billion right now to help them destroy Gaza and kill Palestinians. And they don't just want to kill them. They want them gone. They want a barren strip of land. The geography is on their radar. They want that to be the land of Israel, and the land completely controlled by Tel Aviv. And that's what they're going to get. And we're helping them with that. So what is the answer for Palestinians? I don't know. If I was a Palestinian, I think I would just simply try to stay alive. Wherever I had to go, I would try to stay alive.
Do you think the region will keep silent? Because up to now, they have been very restrained, I think even Hezbollah, etc., and Iran, and Egypt. I mean, do you expect them to intervene at a certain point, or do you expect them to let this happen?
Well, the smaller countries around, other than the Houthi and the folks that are willing to, lob a few missiles to fight, the governments have been very quiet. And part of it is, I think, legitimate in the fact that Israel has nuclear weapons. They make no secret of it. And they are willing to use them because they see their neighbors as subhuman. They see Palestinians as subhuman, but they also see Arabs and Gentiles anywhere, Turks, Iranians, Persians, whatever, as subhuman. So that's kind of they have a reputation of a little bit of vicious unpredictability, and they have nuclear weapons. Would their leadership, would Bibi Netanyahu, who is already facing jail, he is the one who orchestrated, I think, for the most part. Well, he certainly orchestrated the existence of Hamas. That's well documented. It's very possible he orchestrated the leaving open of the borders on October 7th, knowing this was coming, needing some kind of a Pearl Harbor moment, a 9/11 moment, so that he could then put Israel on a war footing in Gaza and postpone his own legal issues and to maintain his power. That's a sign of almost a crazy person, a person who no death is too many. And I don't think you can trust people that behave that way, whether they're acting crazy so that you'll think they're crazy or they really are. Either way, if you're in the region, you don't want Israel to drop a bomb on you. And Israel has proven they will drop bombs on all of their neighbors. They do not care. They will do it without warning, and they'll do it without rationale. So that's part of the problem. So who are the big players that can intervene? Well, where's Russia? Where's China?
What do you think they will do?
I think this is going to be very harsh, very much a realistic or a realism type of thing. I think that they see what we're talking about. They see a weakening of global standing of both the United States and Israel, both on their own actions and because they are linked together with no airspace between the two of them. I think they see that this is hurting the U.S. credibility. It's hurting Israel's credibility. It is a war crime beyond all war crimes. And I think both China and Russia, as emerging leaders, economic and political leaders of the new world, I think that they want it. They benefit from it. Their standing, their credibility, because the words coming out of China, the words coming out of Russia are very reasonable, and they will remain as the voices of reason after this stops. And then when we see what really happened, when they've already, I think, 1.8 million, almost 3/4 of the 2.3 population before October 7th has lost their homes already. So this disaster is 3/4 of the way finished. This relocation, this Nakba, is almost to where it's done with. And the words that Putin and Xi have said will remain. And I think they're preparing for their emergence as global leaders, and not America, and certainly not Israel. And I think we're going to see an inability, an increased unwillingness for the world to purchase items from the United States, including their arms, to purchase items from Israel, including their arms. The Israelis in Israel, and also the pro-Zionist faction in Washington, very, very upset about the BDS movement. Do you remember the BDS movement, which was to boycott? And they were boycotting Israeli products because of Israelis' inhuman treatment and basically the apartheid that it operates in the West Bank and Gaza. So prior to now, they're doing even worse. Well, the BDS movement, wherever it emerged in the United States, they reacted to that most hysterically, most rapidly. I mean, we have many problems in this country. We have, I don't know if you noticed when the Chinese president came to San Francisco, how San Francisco was cleaned up. I mean, it's a disaster. They cleaned it up. And that was a running joke. but our cities need help. We have crime. We have a totally unprotected southern border, which I don't know who's coming through, but it's millions and millions of people. And then they're being shipped all over to places. You know, this country is in turmoil. None of those problems are important, but the BDS movement immediately resulted in congressional action. Any university, any business. In fact, they changed the Federal Acquisition Register, the code on how you can make contracts with the U.S. government, domestic companies making contracts. And they said, if you or any of your subcontractors embrace or say a positive thing about the BDS movement, you don't get a contract. Any of your subcontractors. So now they use private companies to push that down to many other small companies. This is how centralized control works. We have centralized control in this country. So I think the BDS movement will be a big winner from this, and I think it will go global. And I think you're going to see a difference there. But I think it's unfair to think, you know, we like to think, oh, these Arab countries, Saudi Arabia has a lot of money, they're very wealthy. Why don't they just do something? I think we don't understand the disadvantage that they have vis-a-vis Israel.
The very sad conclusion of what you say is that there will be, in fact, the genocide will be completed against the Palestinians.
I think that it will be, and that's why I hope. I'm not there and I don't know. I'm not an expert. It seems to me if you're a Palestinian, you need to stay alive. You need to stay alive, whatever that requires you to do. And if that's part of a large Palestinian diaspora, that's fine. But you need to stay alive, if nothing else, as a witness, okay, as a witness. And I am sure actually that the Palestinians themselves understand this very much. They are not at the advantage, and the world has abandoned them. Certainly the United States has abandoned them. And really, Russia and China together, we call them our near peer enemies. We think, oh, we have to fight them. Well, they don't want to fight us either. And it's not clear how our country is led. I mean, think about our president. I mean, is he even there? We don't know. It's not clear. It's not clear. Our country is also viewed as a little bit crazy. Kind of like Bibi Netanyahu is a little bit crazy. You don't know what he will do. Our country is that way too. You really do not know what our country will do, who's in charge. I think China and Russia both are spending a lot of time trying to understand. In fact, there was another bit of news this morning. The trade representative in the United States wants to eliminate access of the Chinese to particular semiconductors and chips, which has been an ongoing thing. And she said something, she got up and said, we're not letting them do this. And the Chinese response was, excuse me, but your president just made an arrangement and a deal. We had this conversation, president to president, and here's the trade representative who supposedly works for our president saying the complete opposite. So we are a little bit crazy to the rest of the world. I don't think
agreement incapable, as Putin said, was my, I think.
That's right. And that's another reason too, that it's good that the major countries, certainly Russia and China, are saying the right things about what's happening in Gaza. They are saying it, and they want peace, and they don't want people to die. But they really, even if they came to the United States and had a conference with Biden, what possible good would that do? This is a real problem. And I think this is why the people of the world are going to make a decision. They're already making that decision. And I think they have to turn away from the United States, and they have to turn away from Israel, certainly, and not assist it. Do not work with it. Do not be seduced by promises of loans or military aid or any type of thing, and simply turn your back and protect yourselves, because our countries are going down. And Israel, unfortunately, is behaving in a way that could put an end to the Zionist experiment in our lifetimes. And this is not what they want, but their behavior and their actions are going to make it impossible in the long term for Israel to persist and to be profitable. If nobody buys your goods and all you have is 7 million people to buy your own products, that's not a wealthy nation. Wealthy nations have to trade. And if nobody trades with Israel, and if nobody trades with the United States, our countries will collapse.
Thank you, Karen. Like, I don't want to take too much of your time, and we didn't even have a chance to talk about Ukraine. I know it's a lot, but can I just only for a brief moment talk about strategies to get out of this? Like, I can, if I summarize you well, then we see a large empire, the biggest empire ever known, in decay, and it as a consequence of its elites not being sort of in touch with reality, they get into all sorts of dangerous adventures that will, that are endangering security of the whole planet, basically. What can ordinary people do in this time and age? It's almost too overwhelming, what's happening. So what I don't know what your own thoughts are, and how what we should we focus on as ordinary people, or as people who are politically engaged, etc.
I didn't hear all of that question. But the empires are overextended. And the way that the United States conducted and started the war in Ukraine, because, the Russians did invade. They absolutely took that action. That was an action of war. But the war had started long before that. The war against the Donbass, which we were supporting, starting even before 2014, but certainly with the coup in 2014, putting a pro-American person in there and causing the Donbass and to basically do their own referendums then in 2014 that they didn't want to be a part of this. And then there's a civil war that we fomented and supported.
My question was basically, if you can hear me now, my question was basically like, we don't need to get into Ukraine all that much, because it's, I'm already taking a lot of your time. My question was mainly about what ordinary people can do in this time of extreme insecurity and an empire in decay that may or may not do anything very dangerous. What can we do in order to prevent like an ultimate escalation, let's say?
Yeah, that's a big question. What can actual people do? First off, they can be aware that the empire is collapsing and failing before their eyes. And they need to understand when that happens, things get very dangerous. Bad things can happen. So I think we have to, as people, we can't be Pollyannish about this. We have to recognize that we could be in danger, and our neighbors could be in danger, and the planet can be in danger, because we're a nuclear world and these nuclear powers are failing. Certainly the United States, certainly Israel. This is, their constant wars is a sign of, really in many ways, a failed state. So recognizing that is one thing. Then we have to, knowing things are bad, we have to be a little bit brave. How do you be brave? How does an individual be brave? Well, first off, they speak the truth, okay? And they listen to the truth, because that's how you learn truth. You say something, you talk to other people, you learn, you do your research. There's information out there that can inform us. They need to recognize that there's a centrality of Western communications, Western technology that controls democracy. We say, oh, democracy is people making their own decisions. Well, they aren't making their own decisions if everything that they know is fed to them by the state, by the government that they live under, or by the government that their government is owned by, which in many cases in Europe, it is the United States. So we have a personal responsibility to recognize when we're being controlled. Intellectually, what we're being fed as information. And so we need to seek out what we can find as truth. Now, for many people, they don't care about foreign policy. They don't care about government. It's not their interest area. Okay, let's find out what you can do in your community. Are you going to be able to survive hard times? And this sounds like, oh, I'm a prepper. I'm not a prepper. But if you can recognize that an empire that impacts your life, that impacts the planet, is dying, and that it is unpredictable, and that it is dangerous, and that things are going to change in a drastic manner, you need to prepare for that. So what do you need to do to prepare for that? Well, maybe, again, with the courage, you just wake up and start living your life the way you need to live it. Your life may not be as long as you think it will be. So we need to be a little bit more courageous as individuals to do what we can and to recognize what we're being lied to. If it is very easy to listen to what the television or the president says and say, oh, okay, that's fine. Open your eyes. And if Europeans open their eyes, I think this is why there is unrest in Europe, because many in Europe have opened their eyes. They see what's around them. They hear what their politicians are saying, and they go, there's a disconnect here. Why are we engaging in war with Russia and not trading with Russia? Why are we freezing to death in Germany and paying exorbitant amounts for everything and sending more money to Ukraine to destroy Ukrainian lives and to destroy Ukrainian land? You know, why are we doing that? This is a good question. So we need to start asking these good questions. And when someone criticizes us, then we should say, well, you know, I don't care. This is what I'm seeing. What are you seeing? If you don't see it this way, tell me what you're seeing. And we have to do that. I think with the limited resources that every individual has, we need to make choices about how we spend our money, how we spend our time. Do not pay attention to government media, except as information on what they're saying. Do not use that as a source of honesty. They are not honest. Do not spend your money. If you're European, why would you buy an American product? I wouldn't. If I was European, I would not buy an American product. You're egging them on. Why would you buy something made in Israel? You wouldn't do it. Why would you vote for a politician or support a political party that wants to take more money and put it into weapons, make more money and form relationships with the United States? There should be a huge anti-NATO movement in Europe. People should be saying, it's not that I don't like NATO. I just don't want to be a part of it. It causes wars. It increases insecurity. It protects no one. NATO's track record is almost as bad as the United States in the last 40 years. You know, they haven't succeeded in anything except causing chaos and spending money. So I think these are the kinds of attitudes that people need to have. And most people, whether they're interested in this kind of a conversation or just living their lives, most people understand this very much intuitively. What has NATO done for anybody in Europe recently? Nothing. It has done nothing except destroy the environment, cost them money, cause their politicians to be beholden to the United States. That's insane. If I was in a European country, I would not want my politicians to be connected to the United States. And you know, they can be friends with them, but certainly there should be no financial ties. There should be no you know, I want, and again, maybe I'm saying, oh, you're proposing nationalism. Well, you can call it nationalism or you can call it self-interest. I would prefer to call it self-interest. Mm-hmm. It's, you know, when the United States was a positive force for things, maybe in the 20th century, certainly as we stood against anti-communism, or we stood against communism, you know, you could say, well, there's some benefits there. Reevaluate that in modern day. The president, we have an 80-year-old president who is senile. He doesn't know where he is at any time. He doesn't know what he's saying. He doesn't know what he has said. Why would you want to associate with a country that keeps a guy like that as their president? I think these are simple questions that people should ask. And I'm not saying be a friend with Russia. I'm not saying be a friend with China, but look out for your own interests. Do not hitch your wagon to a failing empire, because it will suck you down when it goes down. And it is, the United States as an empire is collapsing before our very eyes. You know, many people say, oh, it's going to happen in the future. No, it's happening now. It's happening now. So what you can do is wake up to that. And I think as far as people that need help, obviously stopping the wars will be the first thing you can do. But if you do have resources, then you need to do what you can do personally to help people. If that is to help a Palestinian, if that is to help a Ukrainian or anybody else that you feel that you can impact, this is a good thing, because you know, our governments are not going to do it. And I think waiting for governments to do things like that when it is not in their interest, and they're not even free to act, in the case of many European governments and many Arab governments, they're not free. They're not really free to act, because, I mean, think about it. Saudi Arabia is totally dependent on the United States for its military. They're going to go against the United States. You're going to go fight the United States when all their maintenance is done in the United States on their military. That doesn't make a lot of sense. That is a strategy that maybe the United States pursued and put in place, and now they have, our potential defenders of the Palestinians are unable to act. So we should learn from this. We should learn from this. Don't depend on the empire to take care of you, and don't put your money in it.
Mrs. Kwiatkowski, thank you very much. I found it super informative, engaging, and also shocking, even though people might know the dangers that we are in. It's good to truly try to understand where it comes from and being able also to prepare somehow. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. I found it super enlightening, and I hope we stay in touch.
Sure.
And maybe we can do another interview at a later stage. But thank you very much for this moment.
Okay, thank you. Glad to be here.
Have a good day.
Okay, you too.